Now what is the Aryan Invasion Theory? We know in our history there was the Greek invasion, the Persian, the Arab, Mughal, and afterwards the Europeans came to India and they colonized the country. This Aryan invasion is one more invasion which took place before all these other invasions. That is the way we are taught history. But in each of these other cases, we know the identity of the invaders. Who were they? They were Greeks, they were Persians, they were Arabs, Mughals and Europeans. We know where they came from, which country they came from. We know who were the leaders in the invasions. For example, Alexander led the Greek invasion. Muhammad bin Qasim led the Arab invasion. Babur led the Mughal invasion. We know about Robert Clive and Alphonse Duplessis. And these pertain to more recent events which took place, say, from after the period of Ashoka to just 300 years ago when the Europeans started coming to India, 300 or 400 years ago. No one treats these invasions as relevant to present day history when you're discussing Indian politics of the present day. On the other hand, the Aryan invasion theory is a totally new theoretical event. That is, it is not recorded anywhere before 300 years ago. It is supposed to have taken place thousands of years ago in prehistorical times. Where did this idea come from? Where did it suddenly come from that there was such a thing as Aryan who entered India and all? This theory originated when the Britishers and the Europeans came to India and established their colonies. They found Sanskrit was very closely related to Greek and Latin. Later they examined the other languages of Europe, English, German, Russian, and they found out all those languages are related to Sanskrit and to the North Indian languages. This started the study of comparative linguistics. And after that they decided that all these languages belong to one family, which was named the Aryan or Indo-European family of languages. They speculated that these languages originated in South Russia, and from there they spread to other parts of the world, including India. So this is the sole fact on which the whole Aryan invasion theory is based, which we are taught as historical fact. After this was decided, they started examining the Rig Veda. It is the oldest text in any Aryan or Indo-European language in the world. They decided that this text will give some proof about the Aryans coming from outside India. So then they started examining the Rig Veda and trying to find proof in it. So that has become a very big industry, the discovery of the Aryan invasion in the Rig Veda. Now, till then the Harappa Mohenjo-daro had not been discovered. This was discovered in the early 20th century, by which time the Aryan invasion theory had been established. When they discovered these sites, Harappan and Harappa Mohenjo-daro sites, and they discovered that these sites pertain to 3000 BC and earlier. So automatically, because the date of the Aryan invasion had already been decided, 1500. So automatically these sites became non-Aryan or pre-Aryan. There was nothing in the sites which showed whether they were Aryan or non-Aryan. So it is based wholly and solely on the speculations which followed the discovery of the linguistic relations between the languages of India, Iran, Central Asia and Europe. It has no actual basis whatsoever, either in any recorded historical text or tradition anywhere in the world, whether in India or outside, or in any evidence discovered from any archaeological excavations within or outside India. The correctness or other of this entire pre-600 BC history of India, as taught in history books, therefore wholly and solely hinges on the correctness or otherwise of this theory. There are four basic postulates of this theory. The first is that the languages of northern India, Iran, Central Asia and Europe are related to each other as members of a language family. This family has been named Aryan or Indo-European as distinct from other language families like Dravidian, Semito-Hamitic, Ostric, Sino-Tibetan, etc. Second postulate is that all these languages, since they are related to each other, they must have descended from a common ancestor. Like we say Marathi, Hindi, etc. came from Sanskrit. So like that, all these languages which are related to each other must have come from some ancestral form. Now that ancestral form is not recorded anywhere. By linguistic reconstruction, they compared all the existing Aryan languages and they artificially reconstructed this language, which is called Proto-Indo-European. The third postulate is this ancestral language must have been spoken in one particular place, because the Aryan languages are spread out from Sri Lanka to the south of India. Because the South Indian languages are not Aryan, they are Dravidian languages. But to the south of India, the language of Sri Lanka, Sinhalese, is an Aryan language. So right from Sri Lanka to Scandinavia and Britain, Aryan languages are spoken. It cannot be possible that the original Proto-Indo-European language was also spoken all over this area. It must have been spoken in one particular area and then it spread everywhere. So that particular area is the Proto-Indo-European homeland. And finally, we have the fourth postulate that this Proto-Indo-European homeland must have been in some central area, and that is in South Russia and not in India. If it is not in India, that means the Rig Veda and the Vedic culture has come from outside, from South Russia. So it was brought into India from outside by Aryan invaders or immigrants. So this is the Aryan invasion theory. Now it must be remembered that according to this theory, even the Britishers are not native to Britain. They also went from South Russia. The Germans are also not native to Germany. But nowhere in those countries do they talk of an Aryan invasion of Britain by the ancestors of the British people, of the English people. It is only in India that this theory has been made into a political issue. Now most Indians who are opposed to this Aryan invasion theory, they oppose the very first postulate. You are saying Sanskrit is related to German and English and Russian, but it is not related to our own Tamil and Santali. So they don't like this idea. But you can't reject an idea just because you don't like it. First point is, postulate is absolutely correct. Now I'll give you some examples. English word three. In Sanskrit it is three. In Russian it is three. In Irish it is three. In Greek and Latin it is thrice. Lithuanian it is thrice. Whereas you compare the South Indian languages, you have Moonru, Mudu, Muji. All these, you can make out it is some completely different thing. You see the Persian numbers. Yak, Du, Si, Chahar, Panj, Shish, Haft, Hasht, Nuh, Daf. You can make out the connection. See the names for the relations. Father, mother, brother, sister, son, daughter. In Sanskrit, it is Pitar, Matar, Bhratar, Swasar, Sunu, Duhitar. And in Persian, it is Pidar, Madar, Biradar, Khosar, Hunu and Duhitar. You take the personal pronouns. In English, you say we, you and they. In Sanskrit, it is Vayam, Yuyam and Te. In Sanskrit, you also have two other personal pronouns. Na means we, Vah means you. Nas or Vas. And in Latin, it is Nos and Vos. Daudrops means dewdrops. You just examine every word, you see the similarity between everything. 12 branches of Aryan languages in the world. 10 are living branches. They are the Indo-Aryan, Iranian, Armenian, Albanian, Greek, Baltic, Slavic, Italic, Germanic and Celtic. And the two extinct languages are Hittite and Tokharian. Hittite has been found in Palestine and Turkey. Tokharian has been found in Chinese Turkestan or Xinjiang. They have been found in inscriptions and all that. Those are not living languages today. And in India, you find 6 different language families being spoken. One is the Aryan or Indo-European, which we have already said. It includes almost all the official languages of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan and Iran, and some Central Asian republics. Then you find the Dravidian language family, which has Tamil, Malayalam, Telugu, Kannada, Tulu and some more languages. You find the Austric language family, which has Santali, Mundari, Khasi, Nicobaris. You find the Sino-Tibetan family, which has the Naga languages, Ladakhi, Lepcha of Sikkim and various other languages. Then you find the Andamanese language spoken by the Andamanese tribals, which by itself is a language family. It is not related to any other language in the world. And you also find a similar language in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, known as Burushaski. This language is also not related to any language in the world. So in India, we have 6 families of languages being spoken. And all over the world, there are a total of 19 families. The second postulate, that these Indo-European languages must be descended from a common ancestral language. That also many Indians don't like. They say, why can't Sanskrit be that ancestral language? But actually, this is also wrong. Because if you examine Sanskrit, what you learn today as Sanskrit is classical Sanskrit, standardized and fixed by Panini. If you see Vedic Sanskrit, it is completely different from classical Sanskrit. There are so many differences. I'll just give one word which will show you how different it is. What do you say in Sanskrit for night? Everyone will say Ratri, Ratra, Rat, something like that. This word is not there in the Rig Veda. It is there only in the last parts of the Rig Veda as a new word which has come into existence. In the Rig Veda, the word for night is Nakt. Nakt is related to night, German Nikt, Latin Noctus. Like we will say Jal, Neer, Paniya. Sanskrit has a rich vocabulary. But all this is not there in the Vedas. The Vedas had a word was Ap, which is related to Persian Ab for water. Or it has Udak, which is related to almost all the other words including water. The word water is also related to Udak. Russian word is Voda. There is a difference between Vedic Sanskrit and later Sanskrit. Now how can you say that, okay, Vedic Sanskrit must be the original language? Because see, now each of us knows our ancestors. I know who my father was. I know who was my grandfather, my great-grandfather. But at a certain point, I don't know who was there beyond that. So suppose I know only my great-grandfather, I don't know someone beyond that. Can I say that my great-grandfather was living since thousands of years, there was no one before him? So just as we know that Vedic Sanskrit is changed into classical Sanskrit, so obviously Vedic Sanskrit before that must have been a different form. So as you go behind, you will reach that Proto-Indo-European language which has been reconstructed by the linguists. Now the third postulate of a common homeland, there was a Proto-Indo-European language, then it has to have one area. So that is what also cannot be rejected once you accept the first two. The only controversial point is the fourth, which says that India is not the homeland. As I told you about the earlier 3 points, how they are based on very logical premises. But this fourth point is not based on any logical premises. It is based purely on speculations and dubious arguments. But this fourth postulate is the one on which this Aryan invasion theory is based. It must be remembered that the Aryan Invasion Theory is a totally new theory formulated only in the last 300 years, purely and solely on the basis of speculations and arguments about the location of the original homeland. It has no basis or support in any traditional textual or inscriptional source in India or anywhere else in the world. It is not based on or supported by any data or evidence from any archaeological excavation anywhere in the world. No trace of the Proto-Indo-European language has been found in any part of the world. No trace of the invading Aryans entering or on the way to India has been found anywhere by archaeologists. And the language of the Indus civilization is still unknown. There is no evidence whether it is Aryan or non-Aryan. It is only these linguistic arguments which are the sole basis of the Aryan invasion theory. And so we have to examine those arguments. Are they right or are they wrong? Now the Aryan invasion theory is based only on arguments. And there are two categories of arguments. Firstly, we have the linguistic arguments. Arguments, not evidence, on the basis of which it was decided that the original homeland must not be in India, it must be somewhere outside. Secondly, you have the textual arguments. Once they decided that the Aryans had come from outside, it was necessary to find some evidence in the Rig Veda, which is the oldest text. So then there became a full industry trying to find out evidence from this. Even a small word in that was taken and it was given a meaning. For example, there is a word, anas. In one Rigvedic hymn, some enemy is criticized as anas. Now anas means, according to all the Sanskrit scholars, it means someone who babbles, who does not talk clearly. But these people decided it means a nas, someone who does not have a nose or someone who has a flat nose. So from this did the theory that when the Aryans came into India, they were like Europeans with long noses, whereas the Indian natives whom they conquered were people with flat noses. So that is why they refer to them as anas. So on the basis of this one word, which is found only once in the Rig Veda, they made up a whole story. So this is the way they have analyzed the Rig Veda. Michael Witzel is at the forefront of the Aryan invasion theory. When I wrote my third book, he simply said, no, I don't want to talk about it. In my third book, I have given data, pages and pages of data. It is not just, I think it is like this, so do you agree? It is pages and pages of data from the Rig Veda and the Avesta. If I am wrong, anyone can just point out, you have given false data, or they can show us, you have given this data, but this data is wrong. But no one dares to touch it because the data is absolute. It is not like taking one word, anas, and making up a story out of it. It consists of pages and pages and pages of data which all point in one direction. That the Aryans moved out from India and went to Europe and Central Asia and Iran. And no one has dared to challenge it. It is a history of the languages, not of the religion or the culture. Very first linguistic argument is the ancestral language is not Sanskrit but something else. So that means India cannot be the homeland. What is the background of this? When first this relationship was discovered between the North Indian languages and the languages of Europe, all the early Western theories decided that Sanskrit was the ancestral language. Therefore, India was the original homeland. German scholars and many European scholars have written books on this. But after some time, when it became clear that Vedic Sanskrit was not the original language, it was also evolved from another language which their linguists reconstructed. This triggered an opposite reaction. And the very fact that Sanskrit was not the ancestral language automatically was construed to mean that India could not be the original homeland. So after that, all the theories concentrated on trying to find the original homeland somewhere. Many theories like South Russia, Eastern Europe or Anatolia. Anatolia is Turkey. And Indian scholars reacted to this by insisting, no, Sanskrit is the original language. Therefore, India is the original homeland. But both sides ignore the fact that just as Vedic Sanskrit is different from the reconstructed ancestor, so is every other known or reconstructed language, and much more so than Vedic Sanskrit. If Sanskrit is not the Proto-Indo-European language, nor is Russian, so how can South Russia be the homeland? So there is no sense in that logic. In fact, the Vedic language is still much closer to the Proto-Indo-European language than any other Indo-European language. For example, Child, who was one of the earliest writers on this, he has given a list of 72 cognate Proto-Indo-European words, that is, which are found in many branches. Now, of these 72 words, Sanskrit has got 70 words, and Slavic only 16. Slavic is the branch to which Russian belongs. If the Proto-Indo-European language was in South Russia, they should have retained more words. Secondly, grammatically, Lockwood points out that Sanskrit has 3 genders, masculine, feminine and neuter in the verbs, nouns. It has 3 numbers, single, dual and plural. Like aham means I, avam means we two, and vayam means we. So like that it has 3 numbers and 8 cases. Now this is the fullest representation of the Indo-European system. That is, even the Proto-Indo-European language which they have reconstructed has 3 genders, 3 numbers and 8 cases. Whereas if you see Latin, Greek or any other language, they have lost some of the numbers or some of the cases. The original case. In Sanskrit only represents the original situation close to Proto-Indo-European. Also in the system of accents, like Vedic Sanskrit and classical Sanskrit, one of the many differences is this of pitch accents. Sanskrit is just a language, you must be learning Sanskrit. So you don't have to learn the accent of any word. But in Vedic Sanskrit, the word has an accent. Suppose there is Vayama. So it can be Vayam with a high tone on V. Or it can be a Vayam with a high tone on Y. And the word meaning changes. It is also found in Greek and partially in Lithuanian. But it is found fully only in Sanskrit. And as Griffith puts it, the Vedic language, we see the roots and shoots of the languages of Greek and Latin, of Celt, Teuton and Slavonian. Second part is mythology. Vedic gods are different from, Puranic gods. There are Agni, Mitra, Rudra, Maruts and Ashwinis. These are the gods of the Vedas. All these gods have representatives in the mythologies of Greece, Germany, Lithuania and all the other countries, Hittite. And as Griffith points out, the deities, the myths and the religious beliefs and practices of the Veda throw a flood of light upon the religions of all European countries before the introduction of Christianity. That is, just as in language, Sanskrit represents the oldest form. In mythology also, represents the original form. For example, all the European mythology have numerous elements in common with Vedic mythology. So if you compare Vedic and Greek mythology, you will find so many common elements. If you compare Vedic and German mythology, you will find so many common elements. But if you compare Greek and German, you won't find any. Or you may find one or two, but those are also common with Vedic. Secondly, Iranian mythology has common elements only with Vedic mythology. According to the Aryan Invasion Theory, when they left South Russia, Iranians and the Vedic Aryans were together. So whatever is the case with Vedic mythology should also be the case with Iranian mythology. But Iranian mythology has nothing in common with any of the other mythologies. It is only common with Vedic mythology. And secondly, Vedic myths are clearly close to the original forms. For example, now we know of Indra, Vayu, etc. as gods. But we know that Vayu represents the wind. We know Surya represents the sun. And the same gods are found in Greek mythology. Zeus, for example, Zeus Pitar, Zeus Pater. In the Rig Veda you find Deus Pitar. And in Roman you find Jupiter. So, but those are fully gods. If you see Roman and Greek mythology, they are gods and all the stories are given. But in the Rig Veda you find that connection with the nature from which, natural myths from which this god has been derived. So, MacDonald points out that the Vedic gods are nearer to the physical phenomena which they represent than the gods of any other Indo-European mythology. So Vedic language and mythology clearly represent forms closest to the original and the primitive forms, in sharp contrast to the other Indo-European languages and mythologies. Now what does this show? This shows that the original homeland must either be identical with the area of the Rig Veda, or else it must be close enough to that area for the Rig Veda to have been composed after they left them. Now another argument is, they say if India was the original homeland, how is it still there are non-Aryan languages in South India and the East? So they say that those were the original languages and the Aryans came from outside. However, Britain is the homeland of the English language. But now it is spoken all over North America, Australia, New Zealand. And in England you find non-English languages like Irish, Welsh, Cornish and Scots Gaelic. So can you from this say that England is not the home of the English language? Obviously not. So this argument is very foolish. Witzel refers to the well-known conservatism of river names, which helps to identify earlier inhabitants. That is, today if you go to America, no Red Indian language is spoken, everyone speaks English, or the other people who have migrated from other parts of the world. But the majority of the rivers of the USA have Red Indian names. Mississippi, Massachusetts, all the rivers of Europe, Germany, France, England, they are non-Indo-European names. They reflect the names of earlier inhabitants of those areas. You see, there you have proof that the Indo-European Aryan languages of Europe are not native to that area. They came from outside, because the river names are non-Aryan. And this is Witzel's writing. In northern India, rivers in general have early Sanskrit names from the Vedic period and names from the daughter languages of Sanskrit later on. This is surprising in the area once occupied by the Indus civilization, where one would have expected the survival of older names, as has been the case in Europe and the Near East. So you see, when they see some fact, they don't derive the conclusion from it, they're just surprised. When it's surprising, now the obvious logic should be that Aryans did not come from outside. Now, European names, even today, for over 4,500 years, they have still retained non-Indo-European, non-Aryan names. Whereas in the Rig Veda, which is at the very least over 3,000 years old, even by the Western scholars dating, even in the Rig Veda, you don't find all the areas of the Indus and Vedic area are Aryan names. They are not Dravidian or Munda or any other this thing. Now, the Indus Valley civilization is one of the greatest civilizations of the world. If it was a non-Aryan civilization, then all the rivers, it was in a river area, the area of the Sapta Sindhu. Now all those rivers should have had Dravidian names or Munda names or Semitic names or whatever language was spoken there. but you find all of them have Sanskrit names even in the Rig Veda. So this obviously proves that they did not have any earlier names. This is the area of the Rigvedic people. The Uralic or Finno-Ugrian language, as I said, there are two languages of Europe which are not Aryan, Finnish and Hungarian. They are known as the Finno-Ugrian or Uralic languages. They are found in Eastern Europe. Now, there are Indo-Iranian words in these languages. There are words which have been borrowed from Sanskrit and Iranian in these languages. The earliest layer of Indo-Iranian, and see the number of words, means every field of cultural activity, they have borrowed words from Sanskrit and Iranian. But this massive evidence of contacts between the Indo-Iranian and the Uralic languages is treated as evidence that the Indo-Iranians stayed for some time in the Uralic areas east of Europe on their way to Central Asia, thence to India and Iran. But in fact, it is the strongest possible evidence to the exact opposite. Because firstly, Sanskrit has borrowed from every language, and anyone who has studied Sanskrit, they claim that they have borrowed words from Dravidian, Munda, everything. But all these borrowings are only from Indo-Aryan and Iranian to Uralic, to Finnish and Hungarian. Linguists have searched and searched to find even a single borrowing which Sanskrit or Iranian has borrowed from Finnish and Hungarian, but they have not found a single word of that kind. Whereas there is a mass of Sanskrit and Iranian words in Finnish and Hungarian. Now borrowings always take place in both directions. English, has borrowed so many words from every language. African, Malaysian, Indian Hindi words have been borrowed. Red Indian words have been borrowed. The only situation where such words, there is no two-way borrowing, there is only one-way borrowing. That happens when immigrant groups do not transmit the words back. For example, medieval Arabic and Turkish invaders and immigrants in India, they came to India. Now all our Indian languages have borrowed so many Arabic words, Turkish words. But those people also, when staying in India, they borrowed so many words from our local languages. But they did not go back to Arabia and Turkey with those words. So in Turkey and Arabia, you don't find these Indian words. Similarly, 18th century Indian immigrants into Fiji, Mauritius and Suriname. There are people who left India 2 centuries ago and stayed in these countries. Now they still speak Hindi of the kind which was spoken here 2 centuries ago. They also use words which are borrowed from the languages of Fiji, Mauritius and Suriname. And similarly, the people of Fiji, Mauritius and Suriname have borrowed Hindi words from them. But these people did not come back to India and write books in Hindi so that these words entered the Hindi language. So you don't find Fiji, Mauritius and Suriname words in our Hindi. You find it only in the Hindi spoken by them there. The European languages have preserved certain immigrant Indian words, which Witzel is not mentioning. For example, ape, Sanskrit kapi and Greek kapos. Apes are not found in Europe, but the Greeks took this word with them. Now all these words are taken by Gamkrelidze, who gives all these words. He claims that Aryans originated in Turkey. But none of these animals are found in Turkey. They are all found in India, and the camel is found in Central Asia. They can only have been taken by people migrating from India through Central Asia to Europe.
वीडियो पसंद आने पर कृपया लाइक करें, शेयर करें और चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करके बेल आइकन ज़रूर दबा दें ताकि हमारे आने वाली वीडियोस की जानकारी सबसे पहले आप तक पहुंचे। धन्यवाद।